Okay, for today, I wanted to kind of cover a topic, um, mostly because it's something that I need to keep in mind. And it's something that I feel like it might be helpful to kind of clarify a little bit about Victor Wolfsbane, because he is a very kind of special and unique villain. And so I just kind of want to talk about what his kind of like thought process is, what he does and how he interacts with the world. How does someone like Victor exist? And how does he interact with other people? And why does he behave in the way that he does? The very first thing is that Victor, when I first created him, he is simply to represent the worst of humanity. He is the embodiment of abuse. Um, an easy way to kind of think about this is think about like the Joker is an agent of chaos. That is his force of nature sort of idea. And when I created Victor, Victor was and is the force of nature of abuse. And so that's what he represents. He is out there representing things like cyberbullying, cheating, genocide, corrupt businessmen. He is out there representing the darkest aspects of mankind that most of us don't really like thinking about. And that to me is something very unique about Victor because I've never written a villain this dark before. But I wanted to create a pure evil villain simply because I wanted a villain to stand out from all the other villains in Kate's rogue gallery. And this to me was Victor was just a very interesting villain, is that he stands out in this way. He changes the environment of a room whenever he enters it. The second he gets anywhere near anyone else, they get uncomfortable, they get scared, they get angry. Even characters who would normally not react. And that to me is something very, well, special. And to me, Victor is just that very one dimensional sort of idea of he is a very bad, pure evil sort of villain. But because I kind of gave him a lot of these unique sort of traits, I gave him a backstory, he's not really one dimensional anymore. He's become very, I wouldn't say very complex, but he's gone quite complex. He has multiple motivations. He is a very unique mindset on how he's doing things. And he has a way of speaking to other people. You can tell when he is in a scene versus when he's not, and how the tone changes. And that to me is, well, I like it. It means that Victor is a very interesting villain. This is something I really want to clarify, especially with how Victor speaks. Is his mindset and his worldview, basically his ideology. Um, when I started sharing my story with my friends and my family, a lot of people kind of came up with the idea that Victor's ideology was basically wanting the truth to be revealed, or wanting people to realize that they're just like him deep down. That is not his ideology at all, even though he may use and adopt that sort of belief. You have to remember that Victor is very manipulative, he's very abusive, and he's willing to say whatever it takes to kind of push people into whatever direction he wants. To him, right or wrong doesn't matter. He's not trying to change the world or push a certain philosophy. His entire worldview, his entire motivation is surrounded doing whatever the hell he wants. That has been his motivating driver this entire time. It is not revenge. It is not trying to state that everyone else is just like him. It is the idea that he believes that he can do whatever he wants as long as he is dominating other people. And that is why his two core drivers in the first novel are control and sadism. Sadism feeds his worldview, control is how he gets it. And I'll talk more about that later, and how his motivations both work together and kind of tear each other apart. And that to me is something very interesting. But as you're reading through the novels, one thing to always keep in mind that is Victor is, no matter what he says, no matter how it's framed, he is not pushing a certain philosophy. That he's not trying to change humanity or trying to push a certain moral system. He is simply just trying to do whatever the hell he wants. And it's usually for something nefarious because it feeds his sadism, or gives him more control, or cements his legacy. And so that's something to really keep in mind. He is not pushing a moral. He doesn't care about right or wrong. This is something that I battled with when I started creating Victor, and especially when I started fleshing out his childhood, is the idea of nature versus nurture. Because when I created Victor, it was nature. He was supposed to have, well, basically to be born with a sense of cruelty, with a urge to have power fantasies, to be sadistic. And in a way, he still kind of was. The issue, however, is his parents and the environment he grew up in. They pushed those sorts of urges, his sort of philosophy, and said, yep, what you are doing is okay. You should continue doing it. You should be proud. You should feel successful being a bad person because it increases our legacy, because it makes us more rich, more powerful, more influential in the world. However, his parents did not realize that Victor would take it as seriously as he did. He became the worst of the Wolfsbanes. He killed his own parents and took over the family name. Why? Because they were in his way. They were in the way of his legacy. They were in the way of his reputation and his success. And so he starts adopting and increasing his parents' philosophy, their mindset, their skills, how they behaved. And Victor shows that. He says phrases like, I don't have friends, only pawns. He snaps his fingers and people flinch. He is very abusive to other people. He is very skilled in blackmail. And these are traits. These are behaviors that he learned from his parents. And one of the biggest mindsets, especially in the second novel, is this obsession with legacy, wanting to be remembered, to be cemented, um, to have your name cemented in the history books for generations to come. Victor adopts that sort of belief from his parents. So, this is probably one of the biggest, I would say it is the biggest and most interesting thing about Victor is his drivers, his motivations. The first one is control. And this is very important to Victor because if he's in control of the situation, he can do whatever he wants, including sadism. This is his pleasure aspect. This is his power fantasy, but this is what makes him really happy. This is what really drives him in the first novel. And what that was very interesting is because Victor has all this power, all this wealth. Um, he is the richest man on the planet. He is the most powerful man on the planet. He can do whatever he wants. He literally has complete control, and yet he changes his driving factor to sadism the second Kate appears on the scene. His driver changes, but control is still there. And what I find so fascinating about Victor is um, these two things start competing with one another, these two motivations. Victor is willing to postpone sadism to have more control later. He's willing to wait until it is the right time and when things are set up in the way that if set up in a way that he can extract the most amount of sadism from it. Um, but if he needs to withhold his sadism for a while in order to have more control, he will. A good example of this is when he is battling Shadowclaw. There is a sense of sadism there, but the second he realizes he's losing, he gives up the sadism and goes back more to control. Um, because he wants Kate. He wants things to be in a certain way. However, in story 9, that changes. Victor, while he was on that tower and while he's giving this public speech about what he's doing to Kate and throwing Emma in an electric chair, he should have known that doing that on a public global scale would shatter his control. And yet he does it anyway. Because the sadism side of himself, the drive to just extract as much pleasure from hurting his own sister, threatens that control. But he's willing to do it because he's having so much fun. And so for me, that's just very unique in the way that those two are like at odds, and he switches between the two of them in the first novel. He states that the only reason for living is for fun, and for Victor, that includes this. However, he is willing to say when Shadowclaw starts pushing back against him, he snaps and says, "This isn't about Catherine anymore." He wants control back and into his life. And so you will see his motivations kind of go into conflict with one another, sometimes working with each other, sometimes even tearing each other apart. And he'll switch between the two of them, sometimes slowly over time or sometimes just immediately, because he just has these two motivating factors. However, In the second novel, a third motivating factor is introduced: legacy. Victor wants to control how he is remembered, and he wants to extract as much pleasure from it as he can. And so he has these two kind of work together when he is trying to cement his legacy in the history books. And for me, this was really interesting because I wasn't planning on this. I knew that I had to get rid of Victor somehow in my novel. He was just so powerful. But I realized after the tower event and how people were reacting to him that they were beginning to push back on his control and that he felt like his sadism was being threatened. Victor, I began to realize, he is going to die eventually. Um, Either by his own men, by the public, by Kate. It doesn't matter. He is going to die eventually. And so he says, fine, I'll die on my own terms. I'll have control over my death, and I'll have fun while I'm doing it. And you know what? Because I'm controlling my death, I'm going to ensure that what I do lives on because I want to be remembered. I want to have the satisfaction of knowing that who I am and what I did lives on. And so that becomes a third driver in this story. He starts talking about a script and following a certain script. And I really like it. I really liked seeing these three motivating factors just come to battle with one another and work with each other. It makes him Victor very, I don't know, unstable, unpredictable, because you're never quite sure which motivating factor is going to pop up in a scene. It could be control, it could be sadism, it could be legacy. And you never know because based on one of those motivating factors, Victor is going to behave in a certain way. And it's starting to tear him apart because he's trying to keep all three of them working together, and they can't. Not always. And he is just struggling to keep his emotions in check sometimes, which I find fascinating. One of the things that I like about Victor, and it's more of my writing style, is that he is very brutally honest. And that to me is um, just kind of something special because I guess I don't like liars, even if it's one of my villains, because I really don't like it when a a character lies. Um, and so that's why Victor tends to be very honest about what he's doing. And at first I was kind of worried about it, and then I realized, oh, this is actually very interesting. Because you would expect someone like Victor to kind of put on a mask and hide who he is. But he doesn't do that, not most of the time. The only person he really tries to put a mask on for and hide his true nature is Sienna. And even then, he is struggling to keep that mask on. Um, all other times, if you ask him, like, anything, he will be completely honest with you. Did you commit this certain crime? Yes, and I had fun doing it, is exactly how he would respond. And he admits it. I mean, there's a scene where he becomes um sorry. There is a scene in the second novel where he does a global broadcast. Oh, sorry. I got something stuck in my throat. There's a scene where he does a global broadcast, and in that global broadcast, you would expect him to kind of shy away from what he's done, especially since he knows that people don't like him for what he did. But he references the tower incident, and when he doesn't shy away from it. He says, "Yes, I threw my niece into an electric chair. I am the bastard." And it's just very shocking. This is a person who just admitted that they just did something horrendous, something monstrous. And number one, he doesn't even feel guilty about it. And number two, he's saying it publicly. And this sort of honesty factor makes characters feel very uneven. I mean, sorry, not uneven, unsettled. Because Victor is very clear in how he feels about people. He does a lot of like half truths, where he tries to bend the truth in a way that fits his reality, or better yet, pushes people to act in a certain way. One of the best examples of this is having Kate believe that she is a monster for his return in her life, simply because she was a superhero. That is not Kate's fault. Yet, if you look at a certain lens, you could say, yeah, Victor reappears back in her life because Victor was drawn to the fantastic fairy tale. But Kate didn't mean to do it. It wasn't on purpose. And Victor is bending that truth to make Kate feel very self-doubt, to be in pain, to kind of just to get hurt. And Victor just likes playing around with that. Another aspect of his honesty that I find fascinating is that he is completely honest with his plans usually. Maybe he'll withhold certain aspects of it. But he tends to be pretty transparent. If you ask him, "Are you manipulating me?" he will say yes. "Are you planning on doing this horrible thing to this individual?" "Absolutely," is how he would reply. And he might even tell you how he's doing it. Mostly because he already has things set up in place, and he already has a backup plan. Anyway, I want to talk about Victor's appearance. And to me, Victor's appearance is very unique, very special. Because if you look at Kate's Road Gallery, everyone stands out. Everyone but Victor. In fact, all the characters in the Fantastic Fairy Tale stand out. Everyone but Victor. And that was on purpose. In the book, he is described as someone in his mid to late 30s who is average, attractive. He could blend anywhere in a in a crowd. And I did that on purpose because I believe that the monsters in real life are the ones within us. You can't judge someone based on their appearance. You have to judge them based on their actions. And that to me is why I want Victor to look the way that he does. If you look at him, he just looks like your average person, your average Joe, someone that you might hang out with, you might fall in love with, someone who would be a good friend, a fun coworker, until you get to know him. And this fits into the embodiment of abuse. You do not really notice an abusive individual until you get to know them. Appearance is a hard way to tell who someone really is on the inside. It doesn't tell you anything. You have to get to know them. And I want Victor to kind of represent that. I want Victor to represent people like cyberbullying, adulterers, um, people who are like corrupt businessmen, people that you wouldn't really think twice about when you're walking down the street, and yet they've done something bad. They've done something monstrous. And Victor is the representation of that. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Victor and what I want to share for this video. Thanks for listening and have a great day.